Projects always have competing demands placed upon them, which can be shown as a triangle representing the triple core constraints of time, cost, and scope. There are secondary constraints that can also impact a project, such as quality and resources. Let's consider an example. If your company is producing a pharmaceutical drug, the range of acceptable levels of active ingredients could be very narrow, and higher levels could have very bad consequences. Therefore, quality would be a constraint in this particular project. Let's say that this project starts to fall behind, and you're looking for ways to speed up the activities. Reducing the acceptable levels of quality would not be an option, so it's a key constraint for this particular project. If meeting your schedule is critical, you will have to look for room in your budget, or possibly ask for more funds. It's always important for a project manager to understand which constraints are the most important to meet stakeholder expectations, and then prioritize accordingly. When managing project constraints, you need to balance the competing demands of your project constraints, and change in one of these interdependent factors impacts the other. For example, if the budget is cut, a project is likely to take longer, and you may need to compromise by removing features to reduce the scope of the project. You must work closely with stakeholders and consider risks that can jeopardize your project. As I mentioned, the interrelatedness of project constraints means that you cannot change the budget, the schedule, or the scope without impacting at least one of the other two. This is why it's so critical to monitor and control the project and to identify variances from the plan. What might seem like a minor deviation from the budget may result in not having enough money to produce all of the features that were agreed to for the project scope. Or a small addition that was added to make a customer happy has led to delays in the project schedule and overspending. As a project manager, you work within the constraints of your project by monitoring and controlling project work. You must regularly confirm that you're performing to the baselines that were created in planning. If you do spot variances, it's important to determine the root cause and realign the project to the plan as quickly as possible. If you find that you do need to introduce change to the project, you can do so, but it should be done using formal change control procedures. Here is an example of a change request that takes project constraints into account. The first section of the change request form is completed by the stakeholder requesting the change, also known as the requester. In the request description section, the stakeholder describes the change she wants to be made, the reasons for the request and the risk it will address, and the request's priority or level of importance. Section B was completed by the project manager and outlines what impact the requested change will have in terms of the work, resources, extra time, and extra costs required. It identifies dependencies or factors that have to be in place before the change can be made. It also outlines any risks associated with making the change and its likely total impact on the triple constraints of cost, duration, and quality. Finally, the project manager includes a recommendation for either accepting or rejecting the request and signs and dates the form. Ultimately, changes should go ahead only if they have business value. The purpose of this particular change request is to lengthen security codes from 4 characters to 7 characters for security reasons. Changing the security code is a change in the project scope. Since the project scope is one of the triple constraints, we can expect this change to impact the budget, the schedule, or both. In Section B of the change control form, we can see the requester acknowledges that both the budget and schedule will be affected. However, the requester also explains that the priority of this request is high because the current security settings are vulnerable to being hacked, and this would affect the quality of the final product. In this case, the project team will need to weigh the added costs of time against the risk of a security breach. The project manager decides that the increased scope is necessary and approves the change request. Due to the constraints, the increased scope means that additional time and funding for the project will be necessary. In summary, projects always have competing demands known as constraints. The three main constraints, known as the triple constraints, can be shown as a triangle representing time, cost, and scope. As project manager, you need to balance these competing demands and work closely with stakeholders to make the best decisions for the project.